everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. My guest today is June Ring. She is from Hudson Technology Partners. How are you doing today, June?
I'm doing great, Megan. It's really good to be with you. Hope you're doing well also.
Thank you. I am. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your day today to talk about some of the things you're going to be talking about today. But first, I wanted to get to know more about who you are and who Hudson Technology Partners is, and some of the things that your role is with that company and some of the things that you provide for manufacturers.
Yes, great. And again, just thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. I know you spend a lot of time arranging these conversations, and you've had some great guests, and I'm really pleased to be a part of it. And so highlighting all the good things that are going on in U.S. manufacturing is really important. So thank you for your hard work. But
Thank you.
So I am the managing partner of Hudson Technology Partners, which serves as a consultative connector to companies of various sizes and market sectors, to be a helping hand as these companies evaluate and procure service providers in the very large umbrella of technology and telecommunications. So about 5 years ago, we got to know the team at UberData Networks, and they're headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, and they work nationally. And we were so intrigued by the technology that they specialize in. We've been working with them ever since as one of their key partners. And at the core, UberData is a networking company. They have network engineers that are certified in many different areas, but their specialized expertise is in a technology called passive optical LAN, also known as GPON, and sometimes just PON. And we're going to be exploring that in depth today. UberData deploys passive optical LAN or PON in various market sectors, but manufacturing has really been a significant focus over the past couple of years.
Is there a reason for that focus in manufacturing? Is there something going on with current technology in manufacturing that they decided to focus mostly in manufacturing over the last couple of years?
Yes, definitely. So before March of 2020 and when COVID hit, we were already seeing the cementing of Industry 4.0 and the adoption of IIoT, or Industrial Internet of Things. Some call it the digitization of manufacturing. And as with many things in our lives over the past year, COVID has really pushed these emerging trends into faster adoption. And so pre-COVID, we were seeing a steady climb in IIoT, but now the numbers and the percentages of manufacturers who are adopting IIoT are really quite enormous. Channel Vision magazine notes that industrial IoT spending is expected to skyrocket within the manufacturing sector during the next 5 to 10 years. So it's growing from 59 billion in 2019 to 375 billion in 2030. And notably, the two largest growth areas in manufacturing are in predictive maintenance and smart robotics. And besides those top two areas, the other things that we see that are catching on in manufacturing in the technology space: augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, data analytics, big data, edge computing, touchless scanning has been a big thing with COVID, automation, machine learning, smart cameras, digital electricity, intelligent logistics. So things like where even shipping containers can have IIoT sensors. You see places, of course, like Amazon using the Kiva robot, where the robot goes and gets the product and brings it to the employee rather than the other way around. We're seeing self-driving trucks, tractors, lifts. With COVID, we're seeing social distancing and health and safety measures being implemented on the shop floor through innovative technologies. So a lot of things going on, but whether a manufacturer is well into the adoption of these types of technologies or just beginning to evaluate them, you can't avoid these trends. They're coming. They're here and they're coming. So, what does all of that have to do with passive optical LAN? Manufacturing facility has in common, no matter how large or small or where they are in those technology adoptions. is that they've got to have a network in their building. And that network must be able to deliver and support an immense amount of bandwidth to support these technological advances. And that's potentially where PON technology can play a role.
So for those of us who might be wondering, what exactly is a network?
Very good question. So simply put, a network is what enables the communication of machines, computers, devices inside your building. And for our discussion, we're talking about what's called a local area network, which simply means connecting things that are physically in the same vicinity. So a network requires an infrastructure or cabling to physically connect those things inside your building. We typically don't see what powers the network in our buildings because those things are largely out of sight, but we're talking about the low voltage superhighway. It transmits data, voice, video, and much more. And a traditional network uses hubs, wires, cabling, switches that look like pizza boxes, firewalls. All these things are housed in rack upon rack in telecom rooms. And then the cabling that's running through large conduit in the walls, the floors, and the ceilings. And so a traditional network requires copper cabling. It's often known as category or CAT cabling.
So with this passive optical LAN, can you describe some detail on what the fiber or the endpoint physically looks like for some of us who might not really grasp that understanding from the difference between that and the traditional network?
Sure. So a passive optical network, it's actually a fairly simple concept. There's a centrally located component called an OLT, and that usually sits in the main telecom room. That's usually on the main floor, and it is transmitting to hundreds or even thousands of small endpoint components or ONTs across a building or a facility. So you have an OLT, and then you have a lot of ONTs. And the only elements that link the OLT and the ONTs are single strands of glass or those fiber optics, and then optical splitters, and those act like mirrors. So the splitters are completely passive in nature, and that's what gives PON, passive optical network, its name. So the passive part of it means no powered devices, no heat produced, and oftentimes no telecom closets for up to 12 miles between that OLT and the ONTs. And kind of a fun fact, some people don't know this, but the transmission of information across fiber occurs with light impulses, whereas transmission of information on copper is electrical impulses.
That's interesting. I didn't know that before. So how widely is this type of technology used then?
So fiber optic networks actually began in the residential market with fiber to the home.
Okay.
And from there, it moved first to the federal government with Department of Defense installations. It's in the Pentagon, for example, and then to the hotel and hospitality market with fiber to the hotel room. And it's a rather mature technology in the hotel world. For example, Marriott standardizes on this technology, and it's been making its way into large corporate office spaces, multi-dwellings like senior living, large facilities like airports and stadiums. And now we're seeing it in manufacturing and industrial applications. So I think it's important to keep in mind it's not always the right answer. It scales very big, but it doesn't scale small. So you're not going to find it in your local bank or pizza shop. But for buildings that are 70 to 80,000 square feet and above, it really should be explored as an option. And we're in the manufacturing world, we're seeing it not only in a manufacturing or a processing facility, but we're also seeing it in distribution centers, smart warehouses, and e-commerce centers. So of course, all of that's really grown in the last year with COVID, and those are great applications for PON.
So what are some of the challenges with a traditional network that there's a need for this newer type of technology, and specifically to manufacturers?
So, really good question and a good area to explore. And I'm going to try to set it up as kind of a compare and contrast. So, the first issue with a traditional network would be bandwidth.
Okay.
Copper cabling has limitations on the amount of bandwidth that it can transmit. And we've already touched on the bandwidth requirements with Industry 4.0. So a fiber optic network allows for much higher speeds and bandwidth capacity.
Okay.
So that's kind of the first issue. I think another issue has to do with space. Copper cabling requires very large pathways to run significant wads of cabling. A bundle of fiber is pencil thick, if you can imagine that. And you compare that to at least a soda can diameter for a bundle of copper. And you have multiple bundles running through a facility. So PON offers a 7-fold reduction in the pathway space that's required and a 20% reduction in the cable weight. So you can imagine fiber's lighter than that copper cabling. And beyond the size differential of the actual cabling, there are also issues with space regarding those closets that we mentioned, because traditional cabling requires those closets every 300 feet. A manufacturing facility, they have to either use production floor space for those closets, or they can actually put them up in the air, which is not a great solution.
Especially for maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to kind of highlight, I guess, sort of as a real life example and a case study, highlight a national client of UberData called SK Food Group.
Okay.
And SK manufactures and distributes food items like sandwiches for Starbucks and some of the airlines. And Melissa Stone is the director of IT there at SK Food Group. And I was thinking, Melissa is really a maven of manufacturing. So she describes the difficulties of maintaining their IT closets or cabinets. They're 36 feet in the air. And they have to get their IT team forklift and scissor lift certified so that they can get up to these cabinets to check for cleanliness, get power to them, keep them climate controlled, and as you were saying, just generally maintaining the network components in that cabinet or closet. And with fiber, you can do away with those telecom closets. You save the space, you save all of the headaches that are associated with that. And then, for the IT team, it's also very challenging within a manufacturing facility. They're making a lot of what's called moves, adds, changes, or MAC work. And so the bandwidth limitations with the copper cabling can mean that they're having to continually upgrade their switches. It's very costly. Melissa talks about always needing more technology. Like, let's say you open up a new production line that's going way out to the end of your facility, and you need to put a security camera or another piece of equipment out there. It's further than copper might be able to run out to that endpoint. So now her team can simply just run a single strand of fiber out to that new camera. It costs hundreds rather than thousands, and it's much more simple to do.
Probably safer to maintain too. I would hard pass on the height needed to maintenance the traditional network. No, thank you. I would pass on that one.
Yeah, so, agreed, Megan. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what fiber optic or fiber in building means for those of us who don't understand?
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too, just in terms of some of those, the compare and contrast. Another difference with the fiber and copper is that with copper, you have this challenge of refreshing your cabling or your network, and that has to take place usually every 5 to 7 years. That requires removing the old worn out copper, replacing it with a newer version. And there are several reasons for this. The copper cabling can't keep up with that increased bandwidth we were talking about. And the copper in the cabling actually degrades over time, and you see performance degradation. And those regular refreshes, they're very expensive and they cause downtime. And with fiber optics, it's not an issue because you put the fiber into your building and it has a lifespan of 30, 40, 50 plus years. Once it's run in a facility, it doesn't need to be. I think a really big challenge that plants have that can be solved with fiber.
And that's an interesting point too that you brought up, because it might cost, the upfront cost might be more expensive than the traditional network costs, but in the long run, the investment is way better than having to keep doing those maintenance checks and stuff.
Right. Yeah, and even on, even both CapEx and OpEx, we see that there are savings involved. So, but just in terms of, kind of what fiber itself means in a building, it's a really important question because I think that term fiber or fiber optics often brings confusion. And so I like to think of it in three different ways. So fiber, the first one would be fiber to your building. And what that means is a fiber circuit. It's coming from an internet service provider that has, fiber in the street. It's kind of opposed to the old-fashioned coax or DSL. It's that internet connectivity that's coming from the street to your building. And that fiber circuit is going to sit in a main telecom closet. You're still relying on a traditional network to distribute throughout your building.
Okay.
The second would be having like a fiber backbone in your building, maybe from telecom closet to telecom closet. And again, that's still relying on a traditional copper network to be sort of the arms and legs of your network in your building. And then the third type of fiber is what we're talking about, passive optical networking, which pushes that fiber deep into the endpoint in a manufacturing facility, for example, pushing it right to the machine. So it's that horizontal fiber. It's wholly replacing an active traditional switch network with a passive fiber network. So it's really a truly different delivery method.
Okay. And what about Wi-Fi then? How does that tie into everything?
So Wi-Fi, there's, I think, often a misnomer that, okay, why should we be worrying about our cabling in our building? Because isn't everything moving to Wi-Fi or wireless? But you still have to have some sort of cable going to that Wi-Fi access point. So that devices like cell phones, sensors, laptops can connect to those access points wirelessly. So I don't know if you've seen, wireless access points. You see them maybe on a wall or from the ceiling. They're typically round, and that's what you're connecting to wirelessly. So yes, wireless is pervasive, but what's wireless is those devices that are connecting to that access point. The access point itself is wired. It needs to be wired. And as Wi-Fi continues to grow, the bandwidth that's required to feed into those access points is only going to grow. And we even expect that fiber optics will be the primary means of powering Wi-Fi down the road because of that explosion of bandwidth that copper cabling largely can't continue to support.
So with all of these different technologies coming out that are going to connect us, are there any cyber security concerns within manufacturing? And if so, what is the impact of those concerns of PON on security? How do those relate to each other?
So definitely security concerns. We're seeing that in many different industries. I mean, cybersecurity is a huge topic these days. There's so much involved with it. It would take a lot to really unpack that in a big way, and it would take somebody a lot smarter than me to really delve way into it. But there are a few advantages in this area for fiber. So fiber allows for encryption. It's built into the PON network, and PON is HIPAA and PCI compliant. So copper is inherently less secure. It's more hackable than fiber because of the difference in how data is transmitted over the two. Another feature with PON is the network interface. It's much more simplified for the IT team that's going to be managing that interface. And we know that human errors are actually top contributors to a company's security threats. And PON reduces that human touch on a network. So yes, great concerns these days with security. PON can certainly be an integral part of a more secure manufacturing environment.
So we already talked about maybe some of the investment benefits for going with passive optical. So can you provide a bigger picture of what the overall cost of passive optical LAN is compared to a traditional solution? Can you cover that more?
Yes. So cost savings, they're going to vary from project to project because obviously there's a lot of variables in a particular building or facility or the project that you're working on. But typically, PON has been shown to have CapEx savings of 40%. So that's kind of your initial outlay. And then ongoing OpEx or operational savings of 60%. So 40% and 60%. And those savings come from a variety of areas. You have the decreased labor costs to install fiber. The materials themselves are less expensive. So fiber is cheaper per foot than copper is by about a third.
Okay.
We talked about those very expensive cable refreshes that have to go on every 5 to 7 years. So you're eliminating the need for that. You're reducing energy costs. And then also we talked about the space savings where the square footage, think about it being changed from a cost center to now being a profit center. You can add more production lines or, other things that are going on in your facility. I have a good friend and a mentor of mine, and he likes to talk about a company's decision-making process through the lens of the triple bottom line. So people, planet, and profit. And passive optical networks really, I think, impact all three of these areas in very positive ways. And so, yes, measuring cost savings with dollars, definitely. We see that with PON, but I think there are other bottom line advantages as well.
Can you get more into those benefits of sustainability of a building with PON and how that affects people on the planet?
Yes, and I think, a big topic these days as well, certainly sustainability and, building our buildings in a way that will achieve some of those goals. So, we think about what we were talking about with a refresh where you're pulling the copper out of a building. So that has a negative impact on the environment. You're both with just you're mining more copper and you're adding that copper that you're pulling out to landfill waste. And so with fiber, you do away with that. It's definitely more environmentally friendly. It's going to stay there, as we discussed, 30, 40, 50 plus years. And so it offers a 200-fold reduction in non-renewable materials with fiber. And then you think about things like the building weight or the building load when you have those wads and wads and hundreds and hundreds of feet of that copper cabling, and fiber really reduces that building load. It can reduce the smoke load in a building. It can reduce things like HVAC tonnage, and it can even impact building components like concrete and rebar. Okay. And eliminating things like ladder racks, which are required to hold up the copper cabling in a building. So the other interesting thing is that the fiber optics can really add to potential LEED accreditation and U.S. Green Building Council points. And all of those things, which are good in and of themselves, but can also lead to tax credits. So, another interesting point is the CO2 emissions that can really be significantly reduced. You have ongoing energy expenditures in a building. So since it's passive, it's not active, it doesn't produce heat, you don't need fans or cooling, being required in the building. So many ongoing environmental benefits with PON.
And I think that's great information too for all of the manufacturers who are trying to come up with ways to figure out how to decrease their carbon footprint. And I've worked with several manufacturers who've included solar panels on their roofs and stuff to do that. So all great information. And my next question is what if it's a manufacturer who has several buildings on like a campus type setting?
So PON can be a great addition to a campus because uh, the fiber can run up to 12 miles. So we talked about that copper cabling with the 300-foot limitation, and you got to plunk another telecom closet. You can run fiber up to 12 miles. So if you think about as your campus type of facility where you have numerous types of buildings that are on, maybe numerous acres even. You can use fiber optic networks between those buildings and connect everything all together. So that network can extend into any part of a manufacturing site. It could be their offices, production facilities, warehousing, even outdoor areas where, there's bandwidth that's needed.
So for companies that already have a traditional network in place, how would they make the move to incorporate this next generation of technology? What are some of the things that they need to consider? Are there any challenges involved? Is it a simple, transition? How would that process be?
So there, I think, are some natural inflection points where it would make sense to consider PON. So if you're building a new building, for sure, take a look at it, expanding your footprint, even a network refresh point. All of those are good points in time to take a look at PON. I will also say that it's really never a bad time to learn more about fiber optic networks and perhaps plan ahead for them. One of our clients found that they could reuse what's called multi-mode fiber that was already inside their building as a type of a hybrid solution as they fully migrated to PON. So there's always ways to kind of crawl, walk, run as you look at your networks, you evaluate your future, and you look at the options that are out there for you.
So then what is the next step for any manufacturer who wants to learn more about this particular technology and maybe more about Hudson and what you guys are doing, or even UberData Solutions? How can they find out more information?
So I would be more than happy to have a conversation of any length with anyone who's tuning in today, who wants to learn more about PON and maybe discuss their particular facility or just talk about their upcoming roadmap and what they're trying to achieve. I think we always want to look at it from the standpoint of, this is your network, but you're trying to solve bigger business problems and challenges, and you're trying to serve your people well, whether that's the people in your own company or your own customers. So we're always happy to talk about those things and kind of look at that big picture. We talk with IT personnel, plant and building managers, physical security leaders, CFOs, CTOs, CIOs, company owners. Really happy to have a discussion with anyone. And you can ping me on LinkedIn and also reach out certainly via email. My email is jring@hudsontechpartners.com. And you can go to our website as well, hudsontechpartners.com, and go to our manufacturing and industrial tab to learn more.
Well, Jan, I want to thank you so much for all the information. I think what you're providing through Hudson is very important, especially with all of the new technologies that are coming out and the automation that's, manufacturers are expecting. And there's definitely huge cost savings involved with PON. And it's such an interesting technology. I never knew about it until I had my first initial conversation with you. So I'm really grateful that you came onto Mavens of Manufacturing to explain what it is and what's involved with it. On a final note, I do know that you're part of another organization, Women in Manufacturing, and I just wanted to close off with what your role is with that group and any more information that you can provide about WIM.
Yes, I'm always excited to talk about WIM. So Women in Manufacturing is the only national trade association that provides support for women in the manufacturing industry. It's about 11 years old and it's growing quickly. I've been involved in the local level the past few years but you can take advantage of things nationally as well as a local member. I'm currently on the board of the WIM Ohio chapter. And WIM has a number of great initiatives to encourage young women to be involved in manufacturing. I know that's really something that you're very passionate about, Meaghan, and they have a student membership in WIM. They have an education foundation that equips women in various manufacturing roles. They have a national annual summit. They offer ongoing professional development. With COVID, it's been a bit challenging, of course, to meet in person, but typically our Ohio chapter hosts plant tours, panel discussions, and other events that allow women to meet each other and kind of network and learn from one another in the manufacturing world. So I highly recommend WIM, Women in Manufacturing.
I think that's great too, that they have done such a significant job offering virtual events. I became a member back in January, and I have been online every single day checking out new events, not just from the Illinois chapter where I'm located at, but other chapters as well, which I think is great, because even though the face-to-face events aren't there quite yet, you still have the opportunity to learn about the different chapters on their website too. So I thank you for sharing that information, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the organization as I am a member and hopefully participating in the summit that's coming up in October.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to being a part of that and other events as well. And a lot of great mentors too, that I think is really important when recruiting younger generations to manufacturing, not just women, but, you know, men too. And it's just a great resource for mentors as well. So thank you so much again, June. I really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to everyone that came in today. I do have one final question for you. What did I not ask during this episode that you thought I should have asked? Did I miss anything, or do you think we covered everything?
Wow. I hope that we just intrigued people to look into it further. I think we covered some great introductory information, and so can't really think of anything else, Meaghan. But I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to talk with you. And again, thank you for everything that you do to highlight manufacturing in our country and in women in their particular roles. So thank you so much. It's been great to be talking with you today.
You as well. Well, thanks everyone that tuned in today for another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. We will be back again next week with another great episode. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Facebook. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Meaghan.
This has been another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Subscribe for more and make sure to tune in next time.